Hello there, this is Mel here from Sneakers Corner. Hope you can hear me okay. So if you can just confirm that you can hear me, that would be great. I'm intending to share a presentation, and I probably will just check to see that it shares okay. So let's just try this first, because I had a problem before where the PowerPoint didn't share, so hopefully it'll go smoothly this time. Let's just try this. Now, so I'm just going to check that it's working. Okay, it seems to be working. Hello to Dragon. Shalom to all of you. God bless you. Welcome. Thank you very much. Can you just confirm that you can hear me okay? And once it gets... Hi, how's it going? Okay, so sound and audio is good. Hello to Faye, good morning to you. Okay, so the Shekhinah and the qiblas. So Shekhinah is a Hebrew word meaning dwelling or settling, and denotes the dwelling or settling of the divine presence of God. And there is a connection, I believe, between this and the concept of a kibla. And this will hopefully widen our sense of the purpose of the qiblas in the early days. And what I'm particularly interested in doing is trying to get into the 7th century mindset. We're often thinking of things through the standard Islamic narrative of the 8th and 9th century. So what I'm trying to do today is just see what the origin of it might be from a Judeo-Christian point of view. So obviously a good place to start would be to look at the Jewish background, where there's a lot of overlap in terms of the idea of praying in a certain direction. And hopefully we can actually join that up with what we find in the Quran, and maybe make a stab at what the kibla might have been in the early days. That's the idea anyway. And I'll be sharing with you lots of different forms of evidence, and hopefully we may not get a conclusion at the end of this, but hopefully we can get somewhere, and maybe we can change our perspectives in a number of areas. I see a question there. What happened with Joe? I'll probably not say any more on that matter. I've decided not to continue to talk about it, and we'll just move on. I've made my apologies to him, and we'll leave it at that. And it's up to himself if he accepts or not. Okay, so right. So I'm going to be drawing from Surah 2, and these are all the references that I could find in relation to the idea of a qibla direction. So this is Surah 2, and then the ayahs are mentioned, as in this case 115. To God belong the east and the west. Whichever way you turn, there is God's presence. God is omnipresent and omniscient. Now, what's interesting about this is the tension between the idea of turn towards God's presence and the following line, God is omnipresent. I don't know if you've noticed that. So there is a sense in which God is omnipresent, and yet God has a specific presence in a particular direction. So that's quite an interesting thing. This comes from the Judeo-Christian worldview, I think. It's and we can pinpoint exactly where this comes from in terms of the Judaic culture. Okay. Now, is the house understood as a Shekhinah? So from verse 125, and we made the house, emphasis on the house, a focal point for the people and a sanctuary. use the shrine of Abraham as a place of prayer, and we commissioned Abraham and Ishmael, sanctify my house for those who circle around it, and those who seclude themselves in it, and those who kneel and prostrate. So let's just remind ourselves, Shekhinah is a Hebrew word meaning dwelling or settling. So far, this word Shekhinah fits nicely with the idea of a house, sanctify my house, with a capital M there, which could indicate God's house. And the circling around it would suggest some religious, festival maybe. Okay. And it's connected to the idea of God's presence, as in the Jewish sense of Shekhinah. Now, if we look at the Festival of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, this is something that Paul has mentioned previously a number of months ago. And if you haven't seen that video that Paul did in terms of the idea of the Temple Mount being a significant point referred to in the Quran, it's well worth going back and checking what he did on that. So this is really following on from his work. The Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, or Feast of Booths, is a week-long fall festival, or autumn festival, commemorating the 40-year journey of the Israelites in the wilderness. Along with Passover and the Festival of Weeks, Sukkot is one of 3 great pilgrimage feasts recorded in the Bible, when all Jewish males were required to appear before the Lord in the temple in Jerusalem. So it's obviously really important. And it commemorates a very important thing, which is the 40-year journey of the Israelites in the wilderness. Okay. You can see a couple of pictures that are related to that. So on this festival, a booth, a tent in a way, is built. It's probably depicted here better. They tend to leave an opening so that you can look into the heavens, the sky, as part of this. And this is still carried on today. It has many names: Feast of Shelters, Feast of Booths, Feast of Ingathering, and Sukkot. The Jewish people built temporary shelters for the feast to remember their deliverance from Egypt by the hand of God. Circling is a familiar practice in Judaism. It happens in weddings, for example. Jews circle while carrying the Torah on the festival of Simchat Torah, the holiday that celebrates the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Jews also circle with the lulav, which is the palm branch, as you can see in the picture, and the etrog, a lemon, on the festival of Sukkot, the festival of Booths, or fall harvest festival. And all of the various references are there. Let me just make sure this is not in the way. Okay. So there are the various references if you want to follow that up. So notice that there's a reference to shelter in this festival and circling. So if we go back to that earlier slide, and let me just see, it's frozen here. Okay. Notice a strong parallel. The house, sanctify my house, and those who circle around it. And the idea that this is a focal point as well is significant. Okay. So just bear that in mind. Now we carry on with Surah 2. Here, an earlier direction of prayer is identified as indicating following the messenger. Was it towards where he was? So this is a different type of qibla, which is not focused on a building as such, but perhaps it's focused on a person. Surah 2, verse 142, the ignorant among the people will say, what has turned them away from the direction of prayer they once followed? Say, to God belong the east and the west. He guides whom he wills to a straight path. Ayah 143 says, thus we made you a moderate community, that you may be witnesses to humanity, and that the messenger may be a witness to you. It doesn't say who the messenger is, but let's not assume that it is referring to Muhammad. It could be something else. We only establish the direction of prayer which you once followed, that we may distinguish those who follow the messenger from those who turn on their heels. So if we look at this afresh, it could be that it's referring to praying in the direction of the messenger, who's like a prophet figure or a religious leader. But this was an old qibla that used to be practiced. It is indeed difficult except for those whom God has guided, but God would never let your faith go to waste. God is kind towards the people, merciful. Okay. I should say here, I'm using the Clear Quran translation. I know it's not great, but it's simple to read at least, and it serves our purpose for today. Now here, what I've done, the only thing I've changed is instead of Sacred Mosque, I've gone back to the original Arabic, Al-Masjid Al-Haram. Okay, so apart from that, I haven't done anything to it, with the exception of putting emphasis on some phrases. So you can see there, we have seen your face turned towards the heaven. A.J. Juice makes a suggestion that this perhaps is an astral direction, but maybe there's a simpler explanation. Maybe it's the idea of the Festival of Booths, of looking through the opening in the roof, that the shelter that they build for the Festival of Booths, and therefore that would be, we have seen your face turned towards the heaven. So that makes perfect sense in that context as well. So that's an alternative possible meaning. So we will turn you towards a direction that will satisfy you. So turn your faces towards Al-Masjid Al-Haram, and wherever you may be, turn your faces towards it. Those who are given the book know that it is the truth from their Lord, and God is not unaware of what they do. Now, the book here could simply refer to the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. It could refer to the Bible, Old and New Testament. Surely can't refer to the Quran, because this presupposes that this book already exists. So it's something different from the Quran. So I would suggest the Judeo-Christian scriptures would be a good candidate for what the book is. Ayah 145 says, even if you were to bring to those who were given the book every proof, they would not follow your direction, nor are you to follow their direction. So you can see there seems to be different directions going on, different qiblas. Nor do they follow the direction of one another. So they even among themselves, they have different directions. And if you were to follow their desires after the knowledge that has come to you, you would be, in that case, one of the wrongdoers. So you can see there's lots of qiblas, not just two. Let me just read it to the end. Those to whom we have given the book recognize it as they recognize their own children, but some of them conceal the truth while they know. You'll notice there's no reference to Mecca, there's no reference to Jerusalem. The standard Islamic narrative idea that the Qibla originally pointed to Jerusalem and then to Mecca is simply an interpretation that's placed on the text that doesn't appear in the text. Jerusalem is a good candidate, at least for one of the Qiblas, because of its high importance, obviously for the Jewish community, but even there we can't 100% be sure, just if we were to look at the text by itself. It goes on, the truth is from your Lord, so do not be a skeptic. To every community is a direction towards which it turns. So that would suggest that there's different qiblas for different communities. Therefore, race towards goodness wherever you may be. God will bring you all together. God is capable of everything. So it's kind of suggesting that it's possible that the different communities will be united in a single qibla. 149 says, and wherever you come from, turn your face towards Al-Masjid Al-Haram. This is the truth from your Lord, and God is not heedless of what you do. 150, and wherever you come from, turn your face towards Al-Masjid Al-Haram, and wherever you may be, turn your faces towards it, so that the people may not have any argument against you. except those who do wrong among them. So do not fear them, but fear me, that I may complete my blessings upon you, and that you may be guided. Okay. Now, as AJ Juice observes, he says, since the surah never mentions Mecca, which occurs only once in the entire Quran, it is not even clear whether the sacred mosque Al-Masjid Al-Haram is a specific mosque or any or several. So it's all supposition. A little bit more on the Shekhinah now. Shekhinah is the English transliteration of a Hebrew word meaning dwelling or settling, and denotes the dwelling or settling of the divine presence of God. So that's significant. So it's connected with two senses. It's like a dwelling and also something that indicates the divine presence of God. I wondered if there was a link between Shekhinah and Sheikh. I got these very good contributions from the Snickerpedian community. Thanks, guys and gals. I think it's mostly guys, but just to be inclusive, I'll include gals. Jose Martinez says Shekhinah is Hebrew and Sakina is the Arabic word for the English equivalent of tranquility. When you are in the divine presence, you are basically in tranquility. So yeah, there is a relation. The divine presence equals tranquility. So well done, Jose, on that one. And then our good friend Ibn A. Mariam says, to me, does not seem to be. In present-day Arabic, the word sheikh refers to a learned person, but in Quranic Arabic, the word sheikh means old man. I cannot feel etymological link with the word Shekhinah as mentioned, and then he includes 3 Quranic references, as you can see there. So thank you, Ibn. Stephen Battery, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, says, check the etymology here. There may be a corresponding word in Arabic, but not sheikh. And yeah, we'd follow that line. So thank you for that link. And then, how do you even read that name? Reverb, maybe, says, not related, I'm afraid. So that's just another confirmation that it's a different word, it's not connected. But it's a nice little wordplay, maybe, that there's connection there, but there isn't apparently. Okay, so Shekhinah or Sakina in Arabic, this term does not occur in the Bible and is from rabbinic literature, so that's interesting. The Semitic root from which Shekhinah is derived, I'm going to say SKN, and I may be wrong in terms of the pronunciation of the first letter, but means to settle, inhabit, or dwell. In the verb form, it is often used to refer to the dwelling of a person or animal in a place, or to the dwelling of God. Nouns derived from the root included shakin, which means neighbor, and mishkan, a dwelling place, whether a secular home or a holy site, such as the Tabernacle. In classic Jewish thought, the Shekhinah refers to a dwelling or settling in a special sense, a dwelling or settling of divine presence, to the effect that while in proximity to the Shekhinah, the connection to God is more readily perceivable. So that's the idea, that if a person comes close to this Shekhinah, they'll feel that God is present. It'll be more perceivable, while still recognizing that God is omnipresent. I hope that makes sense. In some sources, the Shekhinah represents the feminine attributes of the presence of God, Shekhinah being a feminine word in Hebrew, based especially on readings of the Talmud. The prophets made numerous references to visions of the presence of God, particularly in the context of the tabernacle or temple, with figures such as thrones or robes filling the sanctuary. These visions have traditionally been attributed to the presence of the Shekhinah. It is also reported as being present in other contexts. So, for example, while a person or people studied Torah, the Shekhinah is among them. Whenever 10 are gathered for prayer, there the Shekhinah rests. When 3 sit as judges, the Shekhinah is with them. Cases of personal need, the Shekhinah dwells over the head side of the sick man's bed. Also, wheresoever they were exiled, the Shekhinah went with them. So you could see how this could be linked up with the Hijra as well, couldn't it? A man and a woman, if they merit, the Shekhinah is between them. If not, fire consumes them. According to one interpretation of this source, the Shekhinah is the highest of 6 types of holy fire. When a married couple is worthy of this manifestation, all other types of fire are consumed by it. The idea appears to exist before the term. So while the term is new, the idea, the concept, seems to be older than the term. So there's no occurrence of the word Shekhinah in pre-rabbinic literature such as the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is only afterwards in the Targums and rabbinic literature that the Hebrew term Shekhinah, or Aramaic equivalent Shekhinah, is found, and then becomes extremely common from then onwards. Martin McNamara considers that the absence might lead to the conclusion that the term only originated after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, but notes 2 Maccabees 14:35, a temple for your habitation, where the Greek text suggests a possible parallel understanding, and where kenosis, a tent building, a variation on an early loan word from Phoenician, skine, or tent, is deliberately used to represent the original Hebrew or Aramaic term. So that's interesting. We have that kind of sense of tent, dwelling, a temple for your habitation. It all links in together. And of course, before there was a physical temple, the Jews used to use a tent to hold the Ark of the Covenant, where God's presence, the Shekinah, was. The concept is similar to that in the Gospel of Matthew 18:20. This is the words of Jesus, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in their midst. Now, this is actually, just as an aside, this is also, if you take the Jewish context into account, here is Jesus suggesting that he's God. And the common challenge that Muslims give is, where does Jesus say, I'm God, worship me? Well, here he's saying it very clearly. If you understand the Jewish context, he's saying, I am there in their midst. He is God's presence, very clear. Some Christian theologians have connected the concept of Shekhinah to the Greek term parousia, or presence, or arrival, which is used in the New Testament in a similar way for divine presence. So it's all interconnected. So an observation, the concept of the Kaaba is not dissimilar to that of the Shekhinah, especially in this sense, a dwelling or settling of divine presence, to the effect that while in proximity to the Shekhinah, the connection to God is more readily perceivable. And you know how when Muslims go to the Kaaba, they circle it 7 times, just as we saw in the Festival of Booths, and they try and get as close to it as possible, sometimes trampling each other in their enthusiasm to get close to the Kaaba. But this is the Judeo-Christian background to all of this. Well, I should really say the Judaic background to it. Okay. What is foreign both to the Judaic idea and to the Quran itself is the black stone. So this is foreign. This appears to be an accretion. The lack of a reference to it in the Quran would suggest that it was an addition after the Quran was written, rather than something practiced before the Quran, at least in the Quranic tradition. And this is not just me that's saying this. This is from Islamic website. I'm sure there are other instances of it. The black stone is foreign to the Quran. It is only first mentioned in Islamic secondary sources. As you can see there, the ritual of kissing the black stone, or any narrative that even so much as mentions the black stone, is not found anywhere in the Quran. The origins of such a practice are only found in Islamic secondary sources. Now, of course, we have to take St John of Damascus into account. He gives us an indication that this edition was in place by the 730s, so that's useful. So I'm just going to quote at length from him, with special emphasis on that in bold. They furthermore accuse us of being adulterers because we venerate the cross, which they abominate. And we answer them, how is it then that you rub yourselves against a stone in your Kaaba and kiss and embrace it? then some of them say that Abraham had relations with Hagar upon it, but others say that he tied the camel to it when he was going to sacrifice Isaac. And when we answer them, since Scripture says that the mountain was wooded and had trees from which Abraham cut wood for the Holocaust and laid it upon Isaac, and then he left the asses behind with the two young men, why talk nonsense? As you can see there, he's given two reasons why it's nonsense. For in that place, neither is it thick with trees, and he's referring here to Mecca, I presume, nor is there passage for asses. And they are embarrassed, but they still assert that the stone is Abraham's. Then we say, let it be Abraham's, as you so foolishly say. Then just because Abraham had relations with a woman on it or tied a camel to it, you're not ashamed to kiss it. Yet you blame us for venerating the cross of Christ, by which the power of the demons and the deceit of the devil was destroyed. This stone that you talk about is ahead of that Aphrodite whom they used to worship, and whom they called Kabar. Even to the present day, traces of the carving are visible on it to careful observers. So you can see here that while the Quran, which presumably was written before this, because St John of Damascus refers to different passages in the Quran, so it was written before it, it makes no reference to the black stone. So let's say, for argument's sake, the Quran had been written in the 690s. At that time, there's no reference to a black stone in the Quran, and still isn't. Still there isn't. Yet by the 730s, this additional practice of a black stone seems to be included in the tradition without there being any Quranic justification for it. So a tentative suggestion, and this is very tentative, perhaps the addition of the black stone idea came about between the 690s and the 730s, presuming the Quran was put together during the time of Abd al-Malik, and we don't know for certain, so that's why it's tentative. But certainly Abd al-Malik seems to have proclaimed Muhammad and the Quran at that time. So perhaps it came about between the 690s and the 730s, when everything was in flux. Here, Arab pagans who joined the new state religion added their pagan practices to what had been originally intended to be a Judeo-Christian religion of sorts. We don't get much sense in the Quran of a pagan religion. There are maybe a few elements, but it's primarily what appears to be a Judeo-Christian document, probably from fragments from all sorts of places, but still a Judeo-Christian document. So it would sort of make sense if Arab pagans were being converted to this religion, they just brought their practices into the religion and it became part of the practice in the early part of the 8th century and then carried on till this day. So this might explain the sense that it was both an ancient practice but pagan, and yet something that was a novelty and foreign to the Quran, as I've pointed out. So that's my, as I say, tentative suggestion to try and circle the square, or square the circle, whichever, square the circle, I think the phrase is. Now, so there is also another reference to the Shekhinah in the New Testament. Obviously, the New Testament, the same as the Old Testament, doesn't refer to it, the term, but just the concept. Peter's response to the Transfiguration expresses the concept of Shekhinah without naming it. You know, in the Transfiguration story, Moses and Elijah appear with Jesus on the mountain, and Peter, James, and John are there, and Peter is obviously shocked, and he says something that seems to be just a dumb thing he says, but actually there's a lot of depth to what he said. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." This makes perfect sense in the context of the Shekhinah, which is a dwelling for the presence of God. So he's responding to a divine presence by suggesting that he will make a dwelling. This obviously is influenced by one of the most significant festivals in Jewish tradition, which is, as we mentioned already, the Festival of Booths, and it kind of all starts to make sense now. Now, this is from A.J. Juice, and the next few slides are from A.J. Juice as well. Exilarchs were viewed as like divinities. According to 12th century evidence by Benjamin of Tudela, the Zadok leaders of Abbasid Islam were viewed as sort of divinities, perhaps paracletes, if not outright gods, similar to emperors and other ruling divinities. The exilarch was sort of a subordinate minister of defense holding the iron rod of David. So the location of the exilarch and not the black stone was what mattered, if we think about this. The Talmud makes it clear that the location of the exilarch was also the location of the Shekhinah, the Holy Spirit, respectively the Spirit of God. Thus, when we look for the orientation of structures, the whereabouts of the exilarch is paramount, and following the Talmud, that should alternate between Nehardia and Mehuzah, as you can see on the map. Mehuzah is also referred to as Old Medina, the old city. It can be referred to as Ctesiphon as well, and a very significant location. This is where the exilarch lived. He crossed over between Nehardia and Mehuzah from time to time. These were kind of like twin cities separated by water. The river Euphrates was what separated them, if I've not got it mixed up. So either the Euphrates or the Tigris. I think it was the Euphrates. I could be wrong there, but I'll double check later. But in any case, I'm kind of thinking it might be the Tigris. I'm going to go with the Tigris. I think it was the Tigris, actually. Also, just while we're mentioning it here, and this is really for anyone that's new, all of these places underlined are important Jewish centers at the time. Nisebis, Pumbedita, Nehardia, Mehuzah, and Sura. These were all locations of Jewish academies. Okay, and obviously Nehardia and Mehuzah was where the exilarch was typically living, one or the other of those places. Now, this is very important here. The Shekinah, the Holy Spirit, is where the exilarch is, and this is from the Talmud. Okay, it has been taught, or Simon ben Yohei said, "Come and see how beloved are Israel in the sight of God, in that to every place to which they were exiled, the Shekinah went with them. They were exiled to Egypt, and the Shekinah was with them. As it says, did I reveal myself unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt? They were exiled to Babylon, and the Shekinah was with them. As it says, for your sake I was sent to Babylon. And when they will be redeemed in the future, the Shekinah will be with them, as it says, then the Lord thy God will return with thy captivity." It does not say here, we Hesib, and he shall bring back, but we Shab, and he shall return. This teaches us that the Holy One, blessed be he, will return with them from the places of exile. It goes on to say, where is the Shekinah in Babylon? Abai said, in the synagogue of Mehuzah, and in the synagogue of Shaph Wetahib in Nehardia, those two places that are mentioned on the map. Do not, however, imagine that it is in both places, but it is sometimes in one and sometimes in the other. Said Abiah, may I be rewarded, because whenever I am within a parasang, I go in and pray there. So it's obviously considered really important, the places where the exilarch is. So it's the synagogue of Mehuzah and the synagogue of Nehardia. These are the dwelling places where the exilarch is. Okay, and it's not both, but one or the other. So let's just go back, look at the map. So there are the key places. Okay. And the suggestion being that the Jewish people would have directed their prayer in that direction, because that for them is where the Shekhinah is. That's where God's presence is. And therefore, that's a good place to direct their prayer. Okay. And it should be pointed out, Babylon is an ancient Mesopotamian city. This is from A.J. Juice again, that reaches back to the Semitic Akkadian Empire in the 23rd century BC. It perhaps represents the embodiment of Pharisee Jewry. So this qibla here that we're talking about is really significant for Pharisee Jewry, not necessarily significant for Sadducee Jewry. Okay. Perhaps parallel with the evolution of God, El, Babylon was understood at the time to mean gateway of God. So this kind of connects nicely with the idea of them viewing the location where the exilarch is in Babylon and its connection with the ancient history of Babylon being the gateway of God. So it makes a lot of sense for them. Okay. Now, do we have any mosques that we can definitively date to the 7th century and whose qiblas we can be sure of? That would be really helpful. I'm not going to, assert anyone at this stage. I think there's an awful lot of assertions of mosques as being early when really the evidence isn't particularly strong. There's a lot of buildings that are assumed to be mosques and they may not be mosques, so that's an issue, and it's very difficult to be certain of the dating of them. So, if we were certain of the dating of a mosque and we're certain that it was from the 7th century, the qibla then would be really significant, and it'd be interesting to see if the qibla pointed in the direction of Babylon, because that would be kind of key. If so, it may be that what they're pointing to when they are pointing in a direction of religious significance is somewhere else. In other words, not to Mecca. Okay, it may not be to necessarily like a black stone. It could be something else like the exilarch where he's actually living. It may be, as A.J. Juice suggests, that the Levite Sadducee qiblas point to the Nasi, which is their equivalent of an exilarch, their religious leader, while the Babylonian Pharisee qiblas point to the location of the exilarch. And so at the time of the writing of the passages in the Quran, perhaps that it's this communal difference that is being referred to. And I think that's a very compelling argument. Really, it's only when the suggestion of Mecca has been sent out to the whole community that it makes sense for the later Muslims to be praying towards Mecca. Before that has been shared out among the community, it's hard to see how they could be pointing to Mecca. And of course, Mecca has only been established in the 8th century as well. Now, so what does all this mean? This would mean that it is only in the 8th century that we get qiblas divorced from these Judaic ideas, whereas in the 7th century we're more likely to have them linked to those ideas that I'm suggesting today. So in the 8th century, it's when the Meccan, the Hijaz, is introduced, and the idea of the black stone replaces the Jewish leader as the embodiment of the divine presence, the Shekhinah. If they're giving up on the Jewish origins of their religion, if they're basically turning their back on an exilarch or a Nasi, they need something in place of that. And so the black stone provides a useful replacement, which they can view as being symbolic of the divine presence or the Shekhinah. So that is it from me. Let me come back to you all. Now, just have a look at some of the messages. Hiya, Asif. Good to see you. Mel, check Joseph on YouTube's site called Quran Centric, titled The Qibla. Yep, we'll check that. Okay. Let me just have a look at this here. This is from Veronica. Hello, Veronica. When the Romans took Jerusalem, they would enter the holy place without being harmed, so it was not there. The rabbinic interpretation seems to be doubtful. Okay. Now, Corvus, excellent video. Praise Jah. Good work again. Or is it La? Jehovah, maybe? Thank you very much, Corvus. Just see what else we have here. Now, the ark was hidden by Jeremiah according to the books of the Maccabees and is still somewhere in the vicinity of Jerusalem according to that thought. So this Shekhinah thing, it doesn't depend on the Ark of the Covenant and where those are. It seems to be that at a later time, the exilarch assumed the role of the Shekhinah, if you like. That's my understanding of it. No, just have a look and see if there's. No, it's another comment there for Veronica. It's a wonder John of Damascus lived long enough to write those words down. He was a brave man. He obviously didn't write too much, and he probably just got away with that. It was probably stuck in the middle of a very long book, so that it wasn't easily spotted. Okay, and hello to Faye. Faye says, inner peace could be another meaning of Shekhinah or Sakina in Arabic. Yep. Inner peace. Yeah, that works really well. Another interesting comment here from Corvus. Could a sheikh be an enlightened man? Yeah, that kind of works pretty well. So I don't think it's completely different from Shekhinah. I think there is some overlap. It's not etymologically connected, but there's a nice wordplay connection that plays very well, especially when you think of the personal sense of Shekhinah with the exilarch. So it kind of works really well. Now let's have a look and see if there's anything else I've missed. Repent says, I'll have to watch the replay. Blessing to you all, especially Mel. In Jesus' name, thank you very much. And okay, got a correction here. Etrog is a kind of citron, not a lemon. I did see the word citron, and I went for lemon, and I probably shouldn't have narrowed it down. Yeah, you're 100% there. It should be citron. So that could be a number of different fruits. A lime would work as well. So, yeah, that's a good correction. Thank you. Okay, so that's, I think, it. Nice comment here from Great Yorkshire Dreamer. Mate, I love you and the content, but you're quite monotone and it's quite complicated. Please dumb it down a pinch. Okay, so it's I'm talking too highbrow. And sorry about the monotone. That's just the way I talk. I will try and put some I don't know, light into my talking. So sorry about that. Okay, so that's it. Thanks everyone. See if there's any last messages here. From Michael Roman. Hi Mel, thanks for your job. Do you want a new source from 7th century? Absolutely. Feel free to share. So I'll just put it down at the end of the video if you like in the comment section. That'd be great. I'm going to stop here. Thanks all for turning up and look forward to reading your comments later. Bye bye.